and we will start the proceedings right now. So just before I go into the agenda, I'd like to say good morning and welcome everyone to the May meeting of the Planning Committee. For those watching, my name is Councillor Jonathan Vine Hall and I'm Chairman of the Planning Committee. This meeting is being held remotely and is being live streamed via YouTube, and the recording will be available afterwards on our website. This is Rother District Council's first virtual planning committee. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile and other phones on silent if they have one near them, mute their microphones, but do keep your cameras on when not speaking. I will shortly do a roll call to check all the members. As I say your name, can you please turn your microphone on and confirm you are connected? And if you could just say your name, Councillor whoever, and here, that will allow people watching to put a face to a name. Joining us today are Tim Hickling, who's the Head of Strategy and Planning, Jeff Pyra, who's the Team Leader and Manager for North Bexhill, and Sarah Shepherd, who's the Principal Planning Officer, and she's currently covering both east and west of Rother. Deputy Chairman today is Councillor Sue Prochak, and the Democratic Services Officer and Committee Clerk is Julie Holland. Members of the committee today will be making decisions by a named vote, and at that point Julie will call out each member's name in turn and they will either answer for, against or abstain. And please remember to turn on your microphone before you speak. There can be a short delay, so just be aware of that. Should a member lose sound during the meeting and miss part of the discussion, they will not be allowed to vote. It may well be that you can actually hear, but people can't hear you, as does happen, and that doesn't mean that you can't vote. It's only if you actually lose sound. Should you lose connection during an application, I expect you'll advise such at the end of the meeting. If it becomes obvious that a member has lost connection, the Vice Chair or I will adjourn for up to 2 minutes to wait for that connection to be re-established. Those members who wish to speak during the meeting, please indicate that by typing your surname only in the chat facility, pressing the little arrow, and I will see that. The chat facility, I should remind everyone, is what they call persistent, and that means it cannot be deleted and is a permanent record. So I would really ask that you. Apparently, I can't be seen on the screen. So I'm just going to literally adjourn for 1 minute while
I was able to see you on screen, Jonathan.
Hopefully I can now be seen on screen again. Can everyone see me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, yes.
Good, thank you very much. So just remember that any inappropriate use of the chat facility is potentially a code of conduct matter. Members of the public will be speaking today, either for or against the application, and also parish and town council representatives have had the opportunity to register to speak at this meeting. I will call speakers after the officers have presented the application, and there will be an opportunity for members also to ask questions of those speakers who have come along today. Members wishing to ask questions of the speaker should indicate this to me again via the chat facility, and I'll call people in that order. Speakers will be asked to leave the meeting once the application they are registered to speak on has been completed and a vote taken. They can, of course, continue to watch on the YouTube. We may stop for a comfort break when appropriate, and I just remind everyone during that time not to press the leave meeting button, just to turn your cameras and microphones off, and a slide will appear, and I just ask you to come back very promptly as per the time. Once again, I just remind everyone there can be a short time delay before coming up on screen, so just be aware of that. I'm going to do the roll call now. So once again, I just remind you, when I call your name, if you could just turn your microphone on, say your name, and say present. So starting from the top, Councillor Barnes, Mary Barnes. Councillor Mary Barnes. Councillor Mary Barnes. Councillor Mary Barnes. Councillor Coleman.
Councillor Coleman, present.
Okay, well, we know Councillor Mary Barnes is present. Could I ask Julie just to send her a message, because she seems to have lost connection there. Councillor Curtis.
Councillor Curtis here.
Thank you. Councillor Drayson, who is substituting today.
Yes, present. Councillor Drayson.
Councillor Errington.
Councillor Sarah Errington, present.
Thank you. Councillor Ganley.
Councillor Tony Ganley, present.
Councillor Johnson.
Councillor Johnson, present.
Thank you. Councillor Langlands.
Councillor Langlands, present.
Councillor Mear.
Councillor Mear, present.
Thank you. Councillor Prochak.
Councillor Prochak, present.
Councillor Stevens.
Councillor Jeanette Stevens, present.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Councillor Richard Thomas, present.
Councillor Tempe.
Councillor Hazel Tempe, present.
And I am also present. Councillor Earl Williams has sent her apologies. We also have other non-planning committee members with us today. We have Councillor Bird and Councillor Mooney and Councillor Oliver, and I believe Tony Leonard is also with us attending today too. Good, thank you very much. So, if I could just ask just to double check that Dr. Cosmin is also here. If you could turn on your microphone, just confirm you're here, Dr. Cosmin. Dr. Cosmin? Dr. Cosmin, can you hear us?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure you could hear us so as we move along. Good, thank you very much. I'm going to start the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is the minutes. Can I have authorisation to sign the minutes of the planning meeting of the 12th of March as a correct record of the proceedings?
So move.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for absence, Julie?
No, we don't have any apologies for absence, and I believe Councillor Barnes has come back into the meeting, so you might just want to check that she's present.
Councillor Barnes, can you just confirm that you're present and can hear?
Yes, can confirm I'm here.
Thank you very much. I can confirm that Councillor Burns is also participating as an observer. We don't have any withdrawn applications today. Could we have disclosures of interest, please?
Chair, I've got disclosure of interest. I have on item 9, Mrs. Ray is a friend of the family.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mear?
Chairman, I declare an interest as an ordinary member of the Fairlight Preservation Trust, an objector in the 22 Rockmead Road case.
All right, thank you very much. I won't ask you again because that's the first application, but to Councillor Errington, if you could just reconfirm that at the beginning of the appropriate application. So on that basis, I'm going to move on to the first application, which is RR/2018/1975/P. Just to remind you of the order, I will ask the officer, who in this case is Sarah Shepherd, to present the application. After she presents that, I'm going to ask an objector who has come along today, Dr. Ruth Cosman, to speak. And Dr. Cosman, I'll be asking you to speak for just 5 minutes. We are reasonably strict on this, so if you could keep to that. After that, members will have the opportunity to ask you questions, should they wish, and that will be your opportunity not to speak anymore. You're welcome to stay in the meeting, but at the end of the application, I'll ask you to leave, or we will take you away from the meeting. And then, if you want to watch the rest of the planning meeting, please do so on YouTube. Yes, good. Thank you very much. So, if I could hand it over to Sarah Shepherd, who will present that.
Hi. Yes, good morning, committee. My name is Sarah Shepherd, and I'm just starting the slideshow with you for 22 Rockmead Road. The Google map of the area, just in context, We have flood defence down the edge of the cliff here, the cliff area that's had previous slumps here, and the property where my arrow is, and the orange building is next door. I will just do the other PowerPoint for you. Sorry. It's just not quite popping up for us, right. Okay, this is 22 Road. It's take a little while to load. I'm assuming everybody can see the first slide now with the address and the application description on it.
I can see that, yes, thank you.
Right, here's the site plan for you. Due to the current COVID-19 situation, members have been unable to visit this site, but many have visited the vicinity in the past, and as well as the use of Google Maps and a number of photographs, these are also available. Following several landslips between 1997 and 2005, Rother Council commissioned studies of the area, which resulted in a remediation scheme being implemented in order to reduce the rate of cliff erosion. That scheme was implemented and works completed in 2007, and that's the bits that I've just shown you on the aerial. Since that time, there appears to have been little ground movement, and the area slopes below Rockmead Road have revegetated. As part of the scheme, a series of wells were dug within the carriageway of Rockmead Road, and a compressor housing to pump the resultant water away, which is this little building next to 22A, was pumped the water away, and that lies to the side there. This application proposes a replacement garage with a workshop building. The proposed garage is lighter weight construction and in the same position as the original. The workshop is proposed to be attached to its northern side adjacent the road. There's the garage there. The workshop is to go to the north. The existing hard standing would be removed to provide a level area for the workshop. The application was accompanied by a geotechnical report which concludes that the proposals are unlikely to have any significant impact on slope stabilisation works. However, the proposals have been the subject of much discussion and have been further scrutinised by the Council's consultant engineers, who also concluded, "I do not consider the proposed garage workshop will have a significant impact on slope stability." Both reports are caveated and reference that soakaways are not suitable, that the demolished elements should be removed from the site, nothing should be any closer to the cliff edge than existing, and that heavy machinery should not be used. The application has been amended to replace the soakaway with a tank for surface water drainage, which will go to the main sewer. The details for this, also to be located closer to the road, as can be seen on the map here, are considered to be suitable without impact on stability issues. With regard to policy DEN 6 of the newly adopted DASA, I would wish to correct a point made by some commenting on the application. Policy DEN 6 does not set a development boundary for development. Its criteria at points 1 and 2 advise that instability must be assessed and that any remedial measures required are utilised so that the development does not add to instability of the site. The final sentence of the policy states, soakaway drains will not be permitted within a coastal zone within 50 metres of the cliff edge at Fairlight Cove. And that is quoted for you at paragraph 7.2.4 of your report. As such, this application is considered to comply with all parts of this policy. With regards to the policy and the engineer's caveats, members will have seen the update from the agent and read the officer's report. Soakaways are not being used. The drainage tank is located closer to the road and when full, if this ever happens, would be no heavier than the soil it would displace. Although larger in combined size, the replacement garage and new workshop are of a lighter construction and to be no heavier than the existing garage and hard standing to be removed. The agent has confirmed that works will be by hand and that no heavy machinery is to be used for demolition or construction. This is a close-up one of the site for you. That's the caravan to the back. The garage is there. The workshop will go here, and the drainage in here adjacent to the house. I would draw your attention to paragraph 7.2.6 of the report, which outlines for you that in actual fact, a replacement outbuilding could be undertaken under permitted development rights if it were not for the proposed veranda in this case, which requires permission. After careful assessment, here's the garage as existing, the pea shingle in front is to be stay, the hard standing area here is to be removed, along with some soil areas here. This is at the back of the garden, the top area of the cliff where it's revegetated, and that's a photograph with the garden up behind the fence in this location. After careful assessment and consideration, it is concluded that the proposal complies with all the relevant policies and would not be harmful to neighbours, the street scene or cliff stability at this time. The recommendation before you is that permission be granted, but subject to conditions as set out in the report. That concludes my presentation for you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And just before we go on, could I just ask, Councillor Meir has asked to speak very briefly. Councillor Meir?
Yes, Chairman. Could I ask a couple of questions of the officer, please?
If we could hold that, if I could firstly ask you just to confirm whether your declaration was personal or prejudicial.
Personal.
And if I could ask for you to wait to ask the questions of the officer till after we've heard from the member, from Dr. Cosman, yes?
Yes.
In fact, you will be first to speak as ward member as well. So if you don't mind holding on that moment. Dr. Cosman, if you could turn your microphone on, and it is your opportunity to speak. I want to thank you for being our first virtual public speaker, and just take your time, and hopefully you'll be able to get your points across. Members will be able to ask you questions after that. And the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I speak as the Secretary of the Fairlight Preservation Trust. Members should be aware that the Fairlight Cliffs... can I just pause a minute? I'm getting an echo. Is that something I can deal with?
Claire, is that something that you want to comment on? Claire? Are you with us, Claire?
Yes, I'm here, Councillor. I'm afraid I don't know what might be causing that. It was fine when we tested it the other day. I don't know if there have been any changes to your computer, Dr. Cosman, or...
Dr. Cosman, you could leave and rejoin. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes. If you'd like to try that, then that may help.
I'll carry on anyway. It's a bit awkward, but I'll have a go.
We can hear you all right.
You've got no echo. Good.
Not
so
really.
I'll start again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak as the Secretary of the Fairlight Preservation Trust. Members should be aware that the Fairlight Cliffs have suffered major erosion problems for many years. The cliffs are notoriously unstable and subject to failure. The coastal defences which have been constructed have slowed the rate of erosion and landslip, but they have not solved it. Indeed, in the last few months, since the end of February, we have seen very substantial new cliff falls along parts of the cove, close to the site we're discussing. This new development has not been reflected in the officer's reports and the papers you have before you. The Trust continues to object to this application. The reasons for our concern have not been entirely removed or answered as suggested. Let me explain why. In this particular part of Fairlight, Rockmead Road, the problem along the cliffs is caused by repeated landslips, not great chunks of rock falling into the sea as the result of wave action. The significant landslips have resulted in the loss of at least 5 houses adjacent to 22 Rockmead in what is now a completely devastated area. The berm that has been built below Rockmead is in the form of a toe cap designed to hold back the landslip and stop the earth sliding into the sea. The area is unfortunately saturated with groundwater, but the toe cap does not prevent movement on the slopes. These are not, as may be suggested, stable and static. The stated view that there's been no movement in the area is wrong. The cliffs and slopes suffer continual movement with periodic collapses. Rother repairs and maintains these slopes and drainage system along Rockmead Road, which removes vast quantities of groundwater which collects in the area. It's the groundwater that causes the landslip. There are 56 separate wells along Rockmead Road to drain this water. 5 of these are located along the perimeter of this site, just outside the fence. They are operated by a pumping system housed in a compressor house, which is located in the garden in the next door property. That pumping system works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and collects millions of litres of water. As there is constant movement in the Rockmead slopes, they are subject of regular monitoring and require annual maintenance and repairs. These costs, which were over £30,000 last year, are incurred to keep Rockmead Road stable and to protect the homes along the road and in the village beyond. This site is within the area of collapse along Rockmead Road, and the proposed new building will be at best only 15 metres from the edge of the collapsed slope. It is well within the DASA development boundary zone, which restricts development within 50 metres of the cliff edge. It would be difficult to find a more vulnerable and less appropriate spot on which to start new building work. The Geoconsulting engineering report dated the 23rd of July 2018 expressly states in para 5.3 that they have not looked beneath the surface of the site during their site inspection. They therefore do not know the composition of the geology under the surface. No mention is made or could be made of the water content of the layers, as they simply do not know. This whole area is pursed by very weak layers of clay and pooled groundwater at different levels below the surface. No boreholes, an essential requirement if the composition of the ground is to be understood, have been carried out by the technicians. So members should note the proposed new building will require the removal of 14 tonnes of earth and other material from the site. This will need to be dug out. Even if this is done as proposed with hand tools and mini diggers, there will be pneumatic drills required to remove the existing concrete platform, and the work will inevitably cause vibrations on the ground. The attenuation tank, which is said to be the answer to the drainage issue, will itself need to be dug in together with all its piping. The report does not address how much tonnage of earth will need to be removed for this. The proposed building is of course very much larger than the existing garage, 66 square metres as opposed to 25. The fact that the weight of the building, about 14 tonnes, roughly equals the amount of material to be dug out of the cliff top, does not avoid any of the problems caused by the digging into the cliff itself, right on top of the landslip.
To wrap up now, Dr. Osmond, yeah?
The new building, as I say, will be only 15 metres from the edge of the cliff. And you should be aware that in Fairlight, houses have lost more than that in one night. There's no distance, that's no distance at all. Digging into the surface may trigger a further landslip and weaken the cliff. And it could also jeopardise the Rockmead Road scheme of wells for water removal. Reliance is placed on the short email from ECAP sent on the 7th of February. The importance of part of that email is that it warns of the risk of localised failure.
Dr. Cosman,
Yes.
you've gone quite a bit over. Happy to just give you a couple, another sort of half a minute or so just to wrap up. But if you could wrap up, yeah.
I could. I must tell you, it's very difficult because I'm getting the feedback all the time.
We're hearing you. We're hearing you pretty clearly, yeah.
Good.
Do you have another?
I will wrap up now.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
I just wanted to make the point about ECAP. It also makes it clear that it's sensible to avoid putting any further development in areas of risk erosion and cliff instability. Indeed, they suggest that measures need to be put in place to restrict development near the cliff top. And so my conclusion is really, if you choose to reject this application, you should reject it on the basis that the risks are too great. Nothing can be taken for granted, and there's no such thing as stability in this area. And if you're in any doubt, can you err on the side of caution? There's too much at stake for the whole neighbourhood in the short and longer term. We must not put at risk the huge public and private investment that is being expended to preserve these cliffs and protect them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to sort of have to cut you a little short, but I think we heard you very clearly, even though you had a bit of feedback, and I think we fully understand the position you're coming from. I know that Councillor Meek wanted to ask a question of officers, but the first port of call is for members who wish to ask questions of yourself. And so I'm going to just firstly ask Councillor Meek, did you want to ask questions of Dr. Cosman, or did you want to wait?
I think, Mr. Chairman, I will wait, but I do have questions of the officer.
That's fine. That's fine. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Barnes.
Which one, Bill?
Well, I think it's Mary
Thank
Barnes.
you, Chairman. Thank you. I'd just like to ask a question based on the fact that it would seem to me that there's a tremendous amount of expertise gone into providing this report. And I was very interested to hear your comment about the reasons why the cliff has degenerated over the years.
If I could just stop you for a minute, Councillor Barnes. Does somebody have their microphone on? Would everyone turn their microphones off? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Barnes, would you like to continue?
Well, just to cut quickly to my question, and that is, with the amount of work that is obviously going to have to be done should we grant this application, will any good whatsoever come out of the application in that, for example, we're going to be getting an attenuation tank which will take care of rainwater runoff? And will, I understand how passionately you feel against this, but have you got anything that you could say that would be in favour of it? We understand that the neighbour is not against the idea, but what about modern methods of drainage?
Dr. Cosman.
Thank you. Let me just first say about the neighbour, and the neighbour has referred only to the visuals, to the fact that what it looks like, and hasn't dealt with the very important issues that I've raised about the water seepage and the danger of slippage. I'm aware that the attenuation tank has been employed to try and avoid the problem of seepage into the top of the cliff from soakaways, which was the original plan. The soakaways would have been disastrous because of what I was saying about the amount of water. The attenuation tank will hopefully be an improvement. I should say that it will require being dug in to the ground very close to where the wells are positioned in the road. And we don't know what the effect of that will be on the wells. It's also I've read the details about the attenuation tank. It has to be put in very, very carefully to make sure that there's no leakage. And the digging in and the pipes going into the attenuation tank could cause problems. And so I think it also will require maintenance. And that would have to be done by the owner themselves to avoid what could be a disastrous large fall of water into the cliff face.
Good, thank you. Does anyone else have questions for Dr. Cosman? There are no more questions for you, Dr. Cosman. You're welcome to stay in the meeting as you are, listen it through, and then when we get to the end of this application, if you'd like to log out, or if you don't, we'll just log you out. So thank you very much, and please continue to listen. And once again, thank you for being our first virtual public speaker. It provides really a secondary good, useful information as to how this works. Firstly, if we could have Councillor Meir, who is the ward member, to speak, and if Councillor Bird wishes to, if he'd indicate that, otherwise we'll just progress. Councillor Meir.
Mr. Chairman, I was hoping to ask some questions of the officer, some clarification on various issues.
Sarah, have you? Sarah had to reboot. And Sarah, are you with us? I think we may just have to wait for a moment until she reconnects.
Sorry, Chairman, she's currently saying at the moment that she's unavailable, so I think she's got internet connection issues at the moment.
Can you send her a request to rejoin and see if that helps?
That's what I'm trying to do, and it's saying she's unavailable at the moment.
Councillor, it's Jeff Pyra here, the team leader at Bexhill. We are in communication with her, and she seems to be having trouble connecting, which she's trying to sort out, obviously, from home. You'll appreciate I've not been involved in this case as much as Sarah has, but I'm a planning officer here to answer any questions as much as I can, and I will do that. And of course, I think all the relevant information is in the report in any event.
All right. If you could pick up the question, see how we go, and hopefully Sarah will reconnect during that time.
Yes, Mr. Pyra, Councillor Meir speaking. First of all, just by way of clarification, this is a proposal which is outside the development boundary, is it not? The development boundary has been drawn back 50 metres from the cliff edge, so that this particular site is outside the development boundary. Can you confirm that? It is the case, I can assure you, it's in the data.
Okay, well, my understanding is that the 50 metres applies to soakaways, and it prevents soakaways within 50 metres of the cliff edge rather than any development. And I think that the point here that's in the report is that this development is within the garden of this property, where there are permitted development rights which would allow outbuildings very similar to this, apart from this one doesn't meet the criteria because it has a veranda. So the principle of development in this area is something that is acceptable and could happen in any event.
I think we need to look at that. So my understanding, and of course it's a bit difficult to look through documents on the hoof here, is that the development boundary was drawn back 50 metres from the edge. But we may need to look at that. Another question I was going to have, and I was hoping that the plan would come up again, is that I would like to show councillors the location of the pumping house in relation to this site. It is just to the east of the applicant's building and the neighbours. It's not very far away at all. And of course, the entire scheme of cliff protection is dependent on that pump house and on the row of pumps in the road running past this site. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and the plan is now up. We're listening to you, and I think Jeff is putting that plan up for you. Did you want to indicate, Jeff?
Yes.
Jeff, can you indicate on the plan where the attenuation tank is?
It's the pumping station, not the attenuation tank.
Oh, sorry, the pumping station. My apologies.
And the blue building, or the partly blue building, is the pumping station, which has now disappeared from my screen. There it is again. And the proposed site, where it says White Cliffs at the bottom, the proposed development is upwards and leftwards from where it says White Cliffs. I think that is correct.
And so, what's your concern, or what point would you like to raise there?
Is that any slippage in this area can potentially endanger the pumping station, which would have drastic effects on the whole stability of the scheme. Now, I know it's not in the immediate vicinity, but the point I will make my point when I come to speak. But there is the pumping station. There it is in relation to the site, and the wells, over 50 wells pumped pneumatically from the pumping station, run in the road right by this site. So I was just clarifying that at that point, the geography of the place.
All right, thank you. Did you want to make any further statement on this?
Yes, several, Mr. Chairman.
Go on.
There was an appeal referred to in the papers from 2013. There was a retrospective application for some decking on this site at the cliff edge, retrospective. That went to appeal, and it was rejected by Rother, and it went to appeal, and the inspector refused the appeal, and the decking had to be removed. Now, I know that was a different time. The policies change, and engineering advice changes and so on. But I do make the point that an inspector was prepared to uphold Rother's decision not to allow development that close to the edge on this particular plot. I make that point. And I presume, Mr. Pirra, that you confirm that is the case. Hello?
Yes, sorry, that's the case, yes.
That is the case. I'd also like to refer you to the East Kent Engineering Partnership's email dated the 7th of February 2020, sent to Katie Edwards, case officer then. And East Kent Engineering Partnership, of course, are the consulting engineers used by Rother. That's right. And it's only a one-page email, and Liam Woolerton there says, second to last line, it is sensible to avoid putting any further development in areas at risk of erosion and cliff instability. It is sensible to avoid putting any further development in areas at risk of erosion and cliff instability. And his second line is, however, the site is in an area where cliff erosion will continue to take place and the cliff top will naturally regrade during the lifetime of the proposed building. And to be fair, to be complete, any development close to the cliff edge will increase surcharge loading of the cliff and the risk of localized shallow failure. He then goes on, however, for this application, I do not consider that the proposed garage workshop will have a significant impact on slope stability. Now, we don't know exactly what is meant by significant impact on slope stability. I think that is something we have to assess for ourselves and weigh in the balance of whether that risk is worth taking. And again, it's a factual matter. I'm sure that Mr. Pirra can confirm this because I know it to be the case, that the design life of this remediation scheme is 50 years from 2007. We're already 13 years into that. 50 years from 2007. At the end of that period, the pumps will be turned off. That is what was promised at the time. So we have, there is a cut-off point at which erosion is likely to start again, more than just the relatively small amounts we see now. Do you confirm that is the case, Mr. Pirra?
Yeah, that's right. The current contract is for 50 years, and I guess we will see what happens at the end of that.
Well, if we live that long. And my last question is this. I think I would be correct in saying that the committee should take a precautionary approach in relation to these matters, that it should be cautious in taking risks when dealing with unstable land. Is that correct?
Well, it should take an approach in accordance with the development plan, which I think does take that precautionary approach by advising that development should only be permitted where these issues have been properly assessed and demonstrated that they can be that they are mitigated and managed. And of course, that's what their own assessment says, and the advice of our consultants as well. And I wouldn't want to suggest that I know any more than they do in terms of their expertise on this matter.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Good. Councillor Prochak.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Prochak, this issue goes back many years, and Rother District Council, the Environment Agency, and indeed Fairlight residents themselves have invested huge amounts in trying to keep the cliff and stop houses falling into the sea. And I mean, it's from Fairlight that I learnt this new word berm, and we used to have great granite blocks that were brought in by ship. But as has been described, this is not going to last forever. And I think the policy of government now is to actually not to protect homes in danger of slippage. The thing that concerns me is if I lived at the edge of that cliff and I wanted to build a garage or something, then it would be up to me. And if it fell into the sea, so what? I built it, I spent the money on it. But the thing that bothers me is about the cliff stability and the proximity to the pumping station, because we all know what water does. And that this is the bit, and I don't know how this can be answered, because if that pumping station is threatened, I think there will be serious consequences, not just for this particular applicant, but other people along that cliff. And I think if it was just up to that applicant and he was happy to lose his development, it would be fine. But if it's going to affect other people, then that's another question. And I would like reassurance. I mean, the officers have done a lot of work on this, and it does bother me that if he just puts it up without a veranda, he would be allowed to do it. And it puzzles me why.
You've just frozen, Councillor Prochak. Can you hear Councillor Prochak? I think we need you to reboot. Or do I need to reboot?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yeah.
If you can just say
the last sentence.
Just the last sentence, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just said we need, I would need some reassurance, and I think it's a technical nature. I'm not sure if we can get that today, but I feel as though I need reassurance on this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Barnes speaking. Yes, it's just a query really of Councillor Meyer. East Kent Engineering Partnership, who actually asked them for their comment, because it obviously is not particularly helpful to the application's proposal of granting this application. So that's quite interesting, and I just feel at the moment that we've got a lot of information in front of us, which leads officers to suggest that we should grant this. But all we're hearing is very negative comments about a building which is going to have a lifetime. We're talking about there's somewhere we're talking about the lifetime of the building, which that's another thing I'd like really to know. What is the lifetime of the building? Is it 25 years, 50 years in normal circumstances? And yet here we are looking at something which is going to be quite an expense to remove all the rubble, remove everything, employ quite heavy lifting equipment, and yet we are still being told by officers who have obviously done all their homework on this that it's perfectly safe. And I have to say, right at this moment, I feel really quite confused. I'd be grateful really to know why, given the history of this site, given what we've heard from our speaker this morning, and now asking why we are employing the East Kent Engineering Partnership, where all this information is coming from, where is the positivity of allowing this to continue?
Councillor, Mr. Pryor, could you answer those questions? Mr. Pryor.
Yes, hi, I am here, absolutely. So on the first point, the East Kent Engineering Partnership, they're our consultants providing the expertise and advice. And that's obviously set out in part 6.3 of the report. Councillor Meir read some of what they set out. But in terms of when the consultants say it will not have a significant impact, they then go on to explain why it won't, in terms of occupying a similar footprint to the existing garage, extending northward, so away from the cliff edge, not towards it, and that the proposed garage workshop is of a lightweight timber construction, while the existing building is of a prefab concrete construction. So that's where they're saying that in terms of the weight on the cliff, it's very similar, removing a heavier building and some soil and moving the soil around to create a flat area and replacing it with a lightweight structure will mean that the impacts are balanced, and therefore they don't believe there is a significant impact on the cliff. And obviously they're the experts on this. Obviously the surface water drainage is a key issue, and we've talked about that in terms of the attenuation. And they talk more generally about the future and cliff erosion and how to deal with that. But I think they're clear, and that's what in terms of the positivity, we have a policy that allows development here, subject to these quite significant tests in terms of scrutinising the development and ensuring that it will not lead to impact on or increase instability. So that's what they've looked at and they've advised, in addition to the applicant instructing and providing their own geotechnical assessment that is also clear, I think, in terms of how they're going to deal with those issues. So from that point of view, I think there is a positive response that explains why this is an acceptable development.
Jeff, are you there? Yeah, you just froze for a second.
Oh yeah, I've finished on that point.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Councillor Drayson.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Drayson. There's a question on that was mentioned by Sarah Shepherd and was brought up by Councillor Meir. I'm unable to bring it up, but perhaps Jeff can, because I'm not allowed to share the screen. But the DASA section DEN6 on land stability does not actually bring in a boundary along any cliff edge for any development. It just requires it to be properly assessed and any remedial measures are acceptable. However, there is a specific caveat which only mentions soakaway drains within 50 metres of Fairlight Cove. So it's not part of the overall DASA, which doesn't put a boundary in. It's a specific boundary mentioned for Fairlight Cove, but only for soakaway drains, and that doesn't seem to have been accepted, perhaps, from what Sarah said in passing.
Jeff, did you want to make a comment on that? I think Councillor Drayson is clarifying that point.
Yeah, thank you. I think Councillor Drayson is correct on that, and that is in the report. I'm just looking for the right section. 7.2.4. This is outside the development boundary. And Councillor Meir is correct on that. But as I say, it is within it's within a garden where development is permitted. But the issue here, in terms of the 50 metres, that restricts soakaways within 50 metres of the cliff under DEN 6.
All right, thank you. Councillor Meir.
Yes, I welcome that clarification that this site is outside the development boundary. That's correct, is it not?
It is correct.
The site is outside the development boundary. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Langlands.
Yes, Councillor Langlands. I'd just like to ask a question of Jeff Pyro, if that's possible. I mean, I see from the report that the geology is mainly fairlight clays, which is a top layer of sandstone, siltstone. Obviously, that it can compromise the cliff, but what's the current drainage of the main property? Does that use soakaways? Because I can see clearly that this attenuation tank must surely be improving the soakaway of the surface water. And does the main building, will that feed into this attenuation tank, thus reducing the level of water in that top layer? Or does that have a different system?
I don't have the answer directly on that one, I'm afraid. I'm going to open up the drawings again because I think they might show the drainage.
That would be helpful. I just wondered if that attenuation tank could do a better job and reduce this problem with the water.
Okay, so here's that drawing. So it shows the proposed drain from this proposed outbuilding to the chamber. And you can see here it says existing sewer connection.
Yeah.
So I suspect it already drains into that existing sewer, but I'm inferring this from this drawing, and the garage will also drain into that via an attenuation tank in order to control the flow.
I mean, I see that there's a sort of 3-degree slope of the land from the cliff to Rockmead Road, so it slopes away downwards. So I'm assuming that the water itself probably doesn't flow towards the cliff edge, but more away from it, from the properties anyway. I'm trying to look at the positive side here. Are we looking at something that we can possibly improve on in terms of the drainage so that cliff edge is a little bit more stable?
Well, my view on this, and I'm a layman, of course, on this, is that this is a very small little development compared with everything in the area. So it's not going to make that much difference, and that's the advice we're getting. But what we do need to control, and that is in the policy, is new soakaways within 50 metres of the cliff. And of course, what this development does is not do that. It ensures that the drainage is taken away from the cliff, as you say, into the existing network.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the two things I guess we're weighing up are, on one hand, the words of the Preservation Society and perhaps a natural inclination towards caution with this kind of development near a cliff edge. But then on the other hand, we do have quite significant work from the officers to determine whether or not this application actually does any damage or is safe, and quite a thorough list of conditions which to my mind appear to answer every query and concern that's been raised, and I think we do have to move with the policy on this one and move with the expertise of the officers and the experts that they've consulted to see that this is not going to do damage, even though we may be more naturally inclined to suspect it might. And even though obviously the Preservation Society, by their very nature, have concerns with the preservation of the area, it's I think we just have to be guided by the expertise of the officers, and I think those conditions that they set out mitigate any major concerns that I have, certainly.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Councillor Thomas. Councillor Thomas.
Hello, I'm just trying to get. Hello there. Chair, this is a very carefully thought out proposal, and obviously the officers have put an enormous amount of work into this, considering the potential risks and seeing how to mitigate them. I am inclined to vote for the proposal, but I do have one misgiving, which is around the actual construction itself. It seems to me that the East Kent people have very much concentrated upon the final outcome and saying that, you know, that the new building will not present a bigger risk than the older one because of the lightweight construction, etc. What I'm a little bit concerned about is how can you break up and remove concrete without causing at least the risk of considerable vibration? And considering how close the pumping station is, that is a concern of mine, that the actual removal of the concrete, the breaking up of the concrete, could possibly create a vibration which could actually, you know, have bad consequences. That's my major consideration. But apart from that, I'm inclined to vote for the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Barnes. Yes, just following on from Councillor Langlands and her the way in which the drainage takes itself up to the road, and also bearing in mind that paragraph 726 tells us that if this application was to be approved, we can control how the development takes place and stipulate conditions to ensure it is done safely and mindful towards the cliff edge. To me, that gives a fair amount of confidence that it is safe to proceed. But, you know, I'm still weighing up the options.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tempe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Coleman actually stated pretty much what I was going to. Having read the application, listened to the speaker, looked again at the conditions, I feel that they have actually addressed everything. I would like to hear from the officers whether they think that there's anything in the proposal that hasn't been met by the conditions, because if I can't actually find it. Thank you.
Mr. Pyro.
Yes, hi there. Well, yeah, no, thank you for the two councillors who've raised the conditions. You're absolutely right. The conditions are quite extensive and respond to the reports received and ensure that the development is constructed in accordance with the recommended way forward. It's important that we put conditions on that are necessary and reasonable. But yeah, we don't feel there are any other conditions needed. These conditions we feel respond and cover the issues to ensure that the development is acceptable and can be permitted.
All right. I've got Councillor Meir to speak, and I think we've heard a lot of different opinions and, you know, quite a diverse point of view here. I think after Councillor Meir, we might try and conclude this. I will just ask if Councillor Bird, who's also the ward member, wishes to say anything at all. Councillor Bird, did you have anything that you wanted to say on this application? No? Councillor Bird, are you with us? On that basis, I'll move to Councillor.
Yes, I am here. I'm here.
Oh, did you?
I'm quite satisfied with what has gone on. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Councillor Meir, would you just like to sort of give a final statement, and then if somebody would, this is proposed for approval. If somebody would like to propose the recommendation after that. Yep. Andrew, can you turn your microphone on?
I will be very brief, Mr. Chairman. I had hoped, this is a great disappointment really, that councillors haven't been able to visit the site and to see it for themselves, and the sheer scale of the works which have had to be put in here to protect our village. It doesn't really show in the photograph that this cliff is 45 metres high. It's not vertical, but that's the height above sea level. It's a big thing. And I think the crucial point here is that a lot of money, a lot of effort, and a lot of heartache to villagers has been caused by these problems. And here we have something where a small risk, an admittedly small risk, can have dire consequences. The risk may be small, but if that risk materialises, if the pump house were to be compromised, if the pumping system in the road were to be compromised, then the scheme fails. The clay cliff, substantially clay cliff, then becomes wet and it slides. And pure clay has an angle of repose of about 5 degrees. Of course, there's no such thing as pure clay. But it will slide over time, and we will lose a lot of houses. And I am very, very concerned that a small risk, an unnecessary risk, perhaps shouldn't be taken when compared to that consequence. That is all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much. Would somebody like to, I do have Councillor Coleman, would you like to speak, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move for approval of the officer's recommendations to grant planning permission subject to the conditions stated.
Do I have a seconder for that proposal?
Yes, Councillor Tempe, I second that.
Okay, we have a proposer and a seconder. Could I hand over to Julie to do a roll call? So the proposal is to accept the recommendation for approval of this. Julie?
Okay, sorry, I should have said, Chairman, earlier that Councillor Drayson is actually standing in today for Councillor Mrs Earl Williams, so he will be voting on this application.
I did actually, when I did the roll call, I did actually mention that.
Yeah, just to reiterate it then. Okay, members, I'll call your names out in alphabetical order, and I need you to say for, against, or abstain. So, Councillor Mrs Barnes.
For.
Councillor Coleman.
For.
Councillor Curtis. Councillor Curtis. Councillor Drayson.
For.
Councillor Errington.
For.
Councillor Ganley.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Langlands.
For.
Councillor Mear. Councillor Mear.
Against. Against.
Councillor Prochak.
Against.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall.
For.
That's 12 for and 2 against.
So the recommendation is for, 12 and 2 against. Thank you very much. And can I again just thank Dr. Cosman for being our first virtual public speaker, and to thank her for what she said and how she has informed the planning committee today. So thank you very much. And if I could ask you to leave the conversation, and if you wish to continue to follow the meeting, do so on YouTube. Thank you very much. And that takes us to the second application. That's just taken approximately an hour. I don't know if anyone feels the need for a break at this time. Is everyone quite happy to go on? I'm actually going to take just 5.
Chairman, could I just interrupt and say that it might be good to have a break to get Sarah back on?
Yes, I think Tim Hickling has just messaged me to that effect. So we're going to have a a little longer break just to really try and get her on. So we're going to say a 10-minute break. It's 10:36. That takes us to 10:46. Remember, do not leave the meeting. Just put your cameras and microphones on hold for the moment, and we'll see you at 10:46 in 10 minutes' time. Thank you. So we are now reconvening the Rother District Council planning meeting of the 28th of May. And we're now going to move on to the second application, which is RR 2020-49/P, Beckley, Ebro Frost in Hobbs Lane. So if I could have Sarah Shepherd, who is the officer on this case, to present it, please.
Good morning again, councillors. Apologies for the last hiccup. This is the second application for Ebro Frost at Hobbs Lane, Beckley. The application is, as described, for the change of use of the mushroom processing factory to the pasta processing factory. Members may recall that they visited the adjacent industrial unit to the south on Hobbs Lane, where it says the works there, for their committee meeting in February earlier this year. It was the unit occupied by Trade Carpets. This application unit to the rear here is a much larger premises set back from the road, Hobbs Lane on your right hand corner, with the access up here. It's surrounded by trees and woodland, with its own yard and parking areas, and the yard goes all the way around for loading and unloading. There's plenty of space for the vehicles to turn within the site. Residential properties are located off to the south here, and they're also accessed further down Hobbs Lane. The unit was formerly occupied as a mushroom factory. The current pasta manufacturing has been taking place since 2015, but this only came to light following noise complaints last year in 2019, which highlighted the unauthorised user and the operating hours. Previously, it had only been a temporary extension of time for the operating hours, and the previous user was also restricted by condition. Following the receipt of noise complaints and the involvement of the Environmental Health Department, the application also includes the construction for 2 acoustic barriers to deal with 4 extraction fans and a water cooling tower that generate noise off of the rear northwest corner here. The noise mitigation measures are in direct response to the findings of a noise assessment and have been specifically designed to address the identified problems on the northwest corner of the building. With regard to the hours of operation, while continuous operation of the process is required from 5:30 on a Monday morning through to 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening, the applicant has confirmed that there are and will be no lorry or truck movements before 7:30 a.m. or after 6 p.m. on these days. In terms of the comments received, it is noted that this site is not comparable to the very small confined site operated by Trade Carpets, where space for parking, loading and turning is very limited. As such, it would not be reasonable to apply the same traffic restrictions to the larger site, which has plenty of space around it. Neighbour objections with regard to noise have been substantiated, and the applicant has produced proposals to mitigate these complaints. They just remain to be implemented as per the recommended conditions to provide adequate noise attenuation. Having operated at the site for 4 years prior to the receipt of any complaints, it is anticipated that the current user could continue to operate without harm to local residents once the acoustic barriers are in place. As such, the recommendation before you is to grant permission subject to conditions as set out in the report. With regards to the acoustic barriers, these are required to be in place within 2 months of any decision, while a further condition allows for continued monitoring of noise levels should any operations or equipment be changed. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Mooney, I think we have you. Would you like to speak for a few minutes on this? Councillor Mooney?
Hello?
Yes, if you'd like to speak to the committee.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I am very pleased to support the application. A lot of work has gone into this through officers. It's in fact what can only be considered as a huge effort to deal with the noise, which is absolutely the only thing that, well, it's the most serious thing that is happening here on this site. And provided all the conditions are put in place and there's monitoring on the noise levels to be not more than 5 decibels below me, I'd be happy to accept to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Mooney. If we'd like to start the conversation with Councillor Ganley, who's also the joint ward member here. Councillor Ganley, did you want to have something to say?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ganley speaking. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. You will have read in the report that Beckley Parish Council asks for the same traffic conditions to be applied to Eberfrost as are applied to the neighbouring business, the carpet business Manroy. However, the Eberfrost site has room for delivery lorries to turn and manoeuvre, which Manroy does not. And no complaints have been received regarding Eberfrost's delivery vehicles. So there's no reason to apply traffic conditions. The other difference between the two companies is that Eberfrost is fully cooperating with planning enforcement and with the neighbours. It has already replaced 2 air compressors, a steam nozzle and a jet washer, which has been moved to another room. It also intends to erect 2 acoustic barriers to deal with the noise generated by the machinery. It is, as has already been said, it is this noise which has generated the principal complaints from neighbours. In fact, the owner and applicant has set aside the money to do so, to buy the 2 barriers, but it has been suggested by officers not to do so for the time being. There has also been a complaint about smells. However, at the time environmental health checked, there was no discernible odour coming from the site. If any of this does occur in the future, it can be dealt with under non-planning legislation. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you very much. I don't have any other members wishing to speak. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If not, if somebody would like to propose the recommendation.
I move approval. Councillor Ganley speaking.
Yes. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder?
Project has indicated she wishes to speak.
She has done too. I've got that through now. Councillor Project seconded that. If I could hand that over to.
Before you take the vote, could I quickly ask a question? Is it temporary permission?
No, it is actually a full permission. The other application a little while ago was a temporary permission, I've discovered, but this one's actually a full permission, but it would be restricted to the current operators as previously. They would continue to have time limits, hours of operation restrictions, as well as the noise control restrictions as well.
Oh, thank you for clarifying that. I'm seconding it, yeah.
All right, just before we progress, I've got Councillor Drayson.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I've just reread it and nothing to say, thank you.
All right, so we have a proposer and a seconder. I'm going to hand over to Julie for a roll call vote.
Okay, members, I'm going to call your names out in alphabetical order again, and I'd like you to say for, against, or abstain. So, Councillor Mrs. Barnes.
For.
Councillor Coleman.
For.
Councillor Curtis.
For.
Councillor Drayson.
For.
Councillor Errington.
For.
Councillor Ganley.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Langlands.
For.
Councillor Mear.
For.
Councillor Prochak.
Councillor Prochak?
Back. 4. Councillor Stevens?
4.
Councillor Thomas?
4.
Councillor Tempe?
4.
And Councillor Vinehall?
4.
That's unanimous 4.
Okay, that's the recommendation is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Which takes us on to the last application, which is RR 2020/619P, and that is 90 Cranston Avenue, and this is a relative or member of staff. So this one is being done by Mr. Pyra. If you could pick this up, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Chair, sorry, Chair.
Right.
Yes? Yes,
I have personal interest.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Errington, for reminding us of that personal
Sorry,
interest.
Jeff.
No, that's absolutely fine. I should have picked that up too. Continue, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just loading up. So as you say, this application the applicant is a member of staff, and that's why the application is before you. It's for a 2-storey side extension on Cranston Avenue. Here's the site. You can see the side extension is to the east side. That's where it's proposed. This is the existing property. This is the front elevation and the side elevation that faces the neighbour, where the side extension will go. Worth noting, I think, that there are currently windows overlooking the next door property. And this is the proposal. So you can see this element, this is the side extension element here. It extends the full depth of the property. It's worth noting that there are less windows now, and the 2 windows that are proposed are proposed to be obscure glaze. They will serve ensuite areas. So here's an aerial. So this is the property which will be extended here. And in lieu of a site visit, this is the property where the extension is proposed to the right-hand side. Here's the property with its neighbour. I think this is probably the point for me to say that the key policy here is data policy DHG9, which advises that we should permit development where it does not unreasonably harm amenity of adjoining properties, where the design respects the design of the existing property and the proposal does not detract from the character and appearance of the area. The key issue here is definitely the impact on the neighbour, I would say. So this is the current relationship. Here's that property, the neighbouring property. There's another view. What's important is there are no windows in the end elevation, the gable end of this property. So there's no impact on any windows there. As you can see, there's a lot of vegetation in their garden already. And we consider that the impact of a side extension will be minimal or negligible on existing windows within this property, given their location and their current context. It's also just worth noting, I'll go back to the plan, that it's a side extension does not go beyond the rear elevation of the neighbouring dwelling, so there'll be no impact at the rear. So on that basis, we considered that this proposal meets our planning policy and should be granted. Thank you.
Good. I have Councillor Tempe, please. Well, actually, before I have Councillor Tempe, we do have the 2 ward members who may wish to speak. Would either of the ward members like to speak on this application?
Councillor Drayson, not me, Chairman, thank you.
Councillor Langlands?
No, I'm quite happy with it, thank you.
All right, so Councillor Tempe, please. Councillor Tempe, are you with us? Councillor Tempe. I think we should just hold the meeting for 1 minute to see if we can have her. Is she still with us in the meeting? Councillor Tempe. We appear to have lost Councillor Tempe for the moment. So Councillor Stevens, please. It may preclude her from voting.
Yes. Hello. I just wanted to ask: can you walk down the side of that extension? It looks very close to the fence.
No, you won't be able to walk down that side. I think it's going to be about 0.3 meters, but you can. They do have access down the other side of their property to their rear garden.
Which takes me to the next question. If there's any maintenance to be done on the side of that building, how would they be expected to do it if you can't get down the side?
Oh, God.
Well, there is some room. I think they have room to do maintenance, and that's really an issue for them. I think the issue for us is the impact that this would have on the street scene and on the neighbour.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Councillor Meir. Councillor Meir.
Just unmuted. Yes, my comment, it is a comment, is whether the design, in particular in relation to those front windows, really respects the character of the existing property. The glazing, there's an absence of glazing bars, horizontal glazing bars, and the level of the bottom of the downstairs window is higher than those existing. And to me, that looks incongruous and rather detracts from the appearance of the building. Say that is a comment. I don't know if the officers have considered that point.
Jeff, comment.
Well, I think it's a fair point, actually.
Is this something that you would like to address? Should it be approved?
I think you could have a condition that requires details of those windows, so they replicate the windows down the street. On the existing building. Yes.
All right. Good. Okay. Well, if it is proposed for approval, then perhaps that's something that should be included. It does seem appropriate. And we have Councillor Tempe back. Now, Councillor Tempe, did you actually lose connection, or could you continue to hear us?
I could hear you, but I had no video or any way of getting back into the screen. It was weird. Anyway, my question is, you mentioned, Mr. Parra, about the neighbours, but I can't find any objection from them. And you said that was the most significant issue. So I would be inclined to accept this planning application.
Yeah, okay. I mean, just to say, obviously we consider the impact on a neighbouring property, whether they object or not. We take a consistent view to that, but it is true to say that there has not been objection received in this case.
Good. I don't have anyone else wishing to speak, so does somebody want to move the proposed recommendation?
Move approval. Councillor Projak.
Councillor Projak is moving approval. Do I have somebody seconding that approval?
Councillor Tim.
If you could just say your name first.
Can I just say first, just to clarify that the recommendation, I think if this is agreed, would be with an additional condition that requires details of the fenestration for the windows on the front elevation.
Yes, very much so.
I have Councillor Projak who is proposing it, and I have Councillor Drayson who is seconding it in that order. And if others could turn their microphones off for the moment, and that is subject to a condition delegated to officers for regarding the windows. So I could pass over to Julie for a named roll call, please.
Okay, members, I should be calling your names out in alphabetical order again. And if you'd like to say for, against or abstain. Councillor Mrs Barnes.
For.
Councillor Coleman.
For.
Councillor Curtis.
For.
Councillor Drayson.
For.
Councillor Ganley.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Langlands.
For.
Councillor Mear.
For.
Councillor Prochak.
For.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall.
For.
So that's unanimous for 4.
All right, thank you very much. And that takes us on to the last item of the agenda, which is the appeals. Does anyone want to make any comment on any of the appeals before we move that that's resolved? We have Councillor Prochak.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to move we accept the appeals, but also to comment and congratulate officers, because Mountfield Edlin's Farm, I was so pleased to see that's dismissed. That's the only comment I wanted to make.
Thank you very much, and also that there were no appeals allowed. So that's another success for officers and members alike, and it will go well to our record. So thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that motion for approval? Someone?
Seconded, Councillor Ganley.
If you just say your name first, Councillor Ganley has done that. I do have a question from Councillor Drayson, or was that to second that?
That was seconding, Chairman.
Okay, that's fine. So
a bit of finding out to do on that one.
We don't need, as there are no objections. Does anyone have any objections to this to this motion? Okay, so we're not going to do a roll call. We'll take that as resolved. So that takes us to the end of our meeting today. What I would like to do just before we finish up is firstly to thank the public speaker who came along today. They were the first person to do a virtual meeting, and I'm sure that there was some stress involved in doing that for them as well. Thank members for participating. It is it can be a more complicated format, and also officers for the work that was put in. I think any obstacles that we had today were overcome suitably well, and remembering that this was our first, not only our first virtual meeting, but the first live streamed meeting of a planning committee from Rother, hopefully watched by people who would normally not be able to attend. So on that basis, I would say thank you very much. And if the live stream could now be completed, but if members would like to stay on the line just to do a recap of anything you feel we need to recap in relation to just the process of the meeting. So if Julie or